Yo, we got a crazy story coming out of Indianapolis, Indiana, involving 26-year-old Arrianna Miles. Now, Arrianna Miles was in a relationship with a 26-year-old named Charles Franklin. Now,
Who would have thought that a simple and friendly chat could turn into a deadly horror? A young mother with a future still forming did not survive a night that followed months of warning signs. What remains troubling is not only how her life ended, but how clearly the danger had been signaling itself, and how easily those signals were minimized, misunderstood, or ignored.
So this girl's going viral after her death because apparently she was bragging about taking this dude from his bitch. And he's the nigga that unalived her. See, it's because she posted this right here where she said, "You got a bitch." And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "You want a better one?" And he was like, "I want mine." And she liked it.
Arrianna Miles was 26 years old. She was born and raised in Chicago, surrounded by a family that described her as generous to a fault and instinctively nurturing. She was a mother first, devoted to her infant son, structuring her days around his needs and her nights around his sleep. She was also a student, steadily working toward a nursing degree, drawn specifically to neonatal care. She imagined a career spent protecting the most fragile lives at their very beginning. Her compassion was not abstract. Friends relied on her. One close friend had recently learned that Arrianna was a compatible kidney donor and had offered to undergo surgery without hesitation. This was consistent with how she lived, giving freely, believing problems could be solved with patience, love, and effort. In the months before her death, Arrianna was balancing motherhood, school, and a relationship that had once felt affirming and intense. That relationship began quietly, as many do, with a brief online exchange where she chatted up a random guy. Years earlier, Charles Franklin had been someone she knew from high school, a familiar name resurfacing in adulthood. The interaction was casual, light, and suggestive of unfinished curiosity. From that exchange grew a connection that moved quickly. The pace mattered. Within a short period, the relationship became central to Arrianna's life. They moved in together in Gary, Indiana. Soon after, they welcomed a child. From the outside, the trajectory resembled progress. Shared space, shared responsibility, a growing family. Inside the home, however, pressure was building. Relationships that escalate rapidly often leave little room for reflection. Conflicts emerge before trust and boundaries are fully formed. In Arrianna's case, the dynamic shifted from intensity to instability. Disagreements grew more frequent. Arguments became volatile. Those closest to her would later learn that the turbulence was not limited to raised voices. Throughout 2025, a documented pattern of domestic conflict began to take shape. In April, authorities recorded allegations that Charles Franklin had physically assaulted Arrianna during an altercation. The reported behavior included choking, striking, and the use of a belt. The seriousness of the incident was reflected in what followed. Both parties sought protective orders against each other. The legal system briefly recognized that the situation had crossed a threshold. Protective orders are not issued lightly. They are acknowledgments that a relationship has become dangerous. Yet they are also fragile tools, dependent on compliance, enforcement, and the willingness of those involved to maintain distance. In this case, separation did not last. In May, another dispute occurred. Arrianna asked Charles to leave. Court records later noted that during this confrontation, statements were made that were alarming enough to be preserved as evidence. The specifics would later be examined not as isolated remarks, but as part of a pattern. Language used to assert control, to blur the line between affection and threat. By June, police responded again, this time in Cook County. Arrianna reported being slammed to the ground and choked until she lost consciousness. Each incident escalated in severity. Each one reinforced the same reality. The relationship was not stabilizing, it was deteriorating. Still, they continued. This is not unusual. Cycles of reconciliation are common in abusive relationships, especially when children are involved. Hope persists. Familiarity feels safer than change. The belief that love can override harm is powerful, particularly for someone whose instinct is to care, to fix, to endure. By November 2025, the tension was no longer contained. On the 17th of that month, Arrianna and Charles were inside their home on Pennsylvania Street. Their infant son was present. What began as an argument over a routine frustration quickly expanded. Old grievances surfaced. Accusations of infidelity were raised. Arrianna told Charles to leave.
I seriously think she just did that post because she was playing. You know how people just make a post, but the whole of Facebook and TikTok, Instagram, everything has been dragging her simply because she said that. And he's the one that unalived her. Now, DV is nothing to be sitting there joking and playing about. To me, that is just horrible. He literally did.
What happened next would become the central question of the case. According to Charles Franklin, Arrianna retrieved a sawed-off shotgun from a closet while holding their child. He claimed the weapon was handled in a way that suggested confusion or distress, angled downward rather than outward. He stated that he attempted to knock the firearm away and that it discharged accidentally during the struggle. Investigators were tasked with evaluating this account against physical evidence. They examined the scene, the weapon, and the trajectory. They noted that the discharge was at close range and downward. They also observed 5 loose shotgun shells scattered throughout the home, all matching the ammunition found at the scene. The presence of multiple shells raised questions about preparation and access, rather than a single spontaneous act. Equally significant was the emergency call placed after the shooting. Charles contacted emergency services. When asked whether the incident was intentional, he hesitated before denying intent. In the background, Arrianna was audible. Her voice was weak, struggling. She questioned why this had happened. She expressed that she was dying. She asked to be taken outside, a reflexive attempt to remain conscious and breathe. When officers arrived, Arrianna was still alive. As they attempted to render aid, she indicated fear of Charles and asked that he be kept away from her. These statements, made in extremis, were later introduced as evidence. They were not framed as accusations, but as expressions of fear and confusion. In the moments before she lost consciousness, Arrianna was transported to the hospital. She did not survive. Within 2 days, a homicide task force filed charges. Charles Franklin was held without bail. The charges were extensive: homicide, unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon, domestic battery with a deadly weapon, domestic battery in the presence of a child, intimidation, and multiple firearm-related enhancements. If convicted on all counts, he faced a potential sentence of up to 85 years.
She, hopped in his DM or whatever, or messaged him some kind of way, asking him questions like trying to get at him. And she asked a specific question: do you have a B word?
The legal process unfolded under intense public scrutiny. Prosecutors emphasized the documented history of violence, the protective orders, the repeated police responses, and the inconsistencies between Charles's account and the physical evidence. They argued that the shooting was not an accident, but the culmination of an escalating pattern of control and aggression. The defense maintained that the discharge was unintentional, the result of a chaotic struggle. They pointed to the absence of prior firearm use in documented incidents and argued that the scene supported a sudden, unplanned escalation rather than premeditation. As the case moved through the courts, public conversation took a different turn. On social media, attention shifted away from the documented violence and toward the origin of the relationship itself. Arrianna's initial message to Charles years earlier was circulated and dissected. Some commentators framed her as reckless, implying that her early flirtation diminished her credibility or contributed to the outcome. This line of reasoning revealed a deeper discomfort with acknowledging domestic violence as a systemic issue. It reframed the narrative away from patterns of abuse and toward personal morality. It suggested that a woman's early choices could retroactively justify harm inflicted years later. Arrianna's life was larger than that framing allowed. She was not defined by how a relationship began, but by how she lived within it, by her attempts to create stability to protect her child, and to navigate a situation that grew more dangerous with time. Mistakes, even serious ones, do not negate the right to safety. The controversy surrounding the case was not limited to public opinion. Questions were raised about the effectiveness of protective orders and the gaps between legal intervention and actual protection. Why were repeated allegations not enough to force a permanent separation? Why did the system rely so heavily on the victim's ability to disengage, even when violence had already occurred? Throughout the proceedings, Arrianna's absence was constant. Her son, not yet 1 year old, was left without his mother. He would grow up with records and reports, with a story told by others, rather than memories formed with her. Her family mourned not only her death, but the future she had been building: graduation, a nursing career, the quiet pride of watching her child grow. Arrianna Miles should still be alive. Her death was not the result of a single argument, but of a progression that was visible long before November 17th. Her story is not a cautionary tale about romance or impulse. It is a record of what happens when control is mistaken for love and when repeated harm is treated as temporary turbulence rather than a fatal trajectory. The impact endures quietly. In a child growing up without a mother, in a family navigating grief alongside unanswered questions, in a community forced to confront how easily compassion can be exploited and how slowly systems respond to patterns that are, in hindsight, unmistakable.
On November 17th, Arrianna Miles and her boyfriend got into a dispute, and he used his sawed-off shotgun, and he pew-pewed her. I don't know where he pew-pewed her. The news didn't really say that, but he did. The 2400 block of Pennsylvania Street in Gary.
No resolution restores what was lost. There is only the responsibility to remember Arrianna as she was: a devoted mother, a student, a friend, a woman whose life mattered, and to recognize that the danger she faced did not arrive suddenly. It developed over time, in moments that were documented, minimized, and ultimately ignored. That is what makes the outcome so difficult to accept, and that is where her story remains. The unanswered questions extend beyond individual choices and legal definitions. In domestic violence cases, escalation rarely announces itself as a single decisive moment. It advances incrementally. The first incident reframes boundaries. The second normalizes recovery and apology. By the third or fourth, the violence exists alongside routines of family life, financial dependence, and shared parenting. Risk becomes background noise. Arrianna's case followed this pattern with unsettling precision. Her role as a caregiver complicated the calculus. Leaving didn't mean only ending a relationship. It meant dismantling a household, navigating custody, and confronting uncertainty while caring for an infant. For many victims, the danger of staying is weighed against the perceived danger of leaving. That calculation is often made without adequate support, resources, or enforcement mechanisms to make separation truly safe. The presence of a firearm transformed volatility into lethality.
He said, yeah. So would she responded back, oh, would you like a better one? Boom. He said he wouldn't mind. So it was alleged from this point, this is when they started rocking. Now, I don't know how many years they had been together, but they had definitely been together long enough.
Arrianna's recorded fear in her final moments became central not only as evidence, but as testimony to a reality she had been living with for months. It underscored that the violence was not theoretical or exaggerated. It was immediate, personal, and ongoing. Those moments stripped away narratives that framed the incident as an unforeseeable accident. They anchored it in lived experience. Public reaction revealed another layer of discomfort, a tendency to search for a narrative that explains violence without confronting its persistence. By scrutinizing Arrianna's early decisions, some observers avoided engaging with the more unsettling truth that abuse can emerge in ordinary relationships, and that good intentions do not neutralize dangerous behavior. This reframing shifts responsibility away from perpetrators and systems, placing it instead on victims' perceived flaws. The trial, regardless of outcome, cannot resolve these tensions. A conviction may affirm accountability, but it will not restore trust in protective mechanisms that failed to function when warning signs were clear. An acquittal, should it occur, would likely deepen public unease, reinforcing the sense that legal standards struggle to address domestic violence's cumulative nature. Either result leaves unresolved questions about prevention and response. For Arrianna's son, the consequences are lifelong and largely invisible. He will inherit a story shaped by court records and memory fragments rather than lived experience. His understanding of his mother will be mediated through photographs, testimonies, and the grief of those who loved her. This advocacy is not about retribution. It is about acknowledgement. What would it have taken for those warning signs to be recognized as an emergency rather than a phase? And how many similar situations are unfolding now, unnoticed or dismissed, until they reach the same point of no return? Stories like this carry weight only if they change how danger is recognized and addressed. That change begins with listening without judgment, taking reports seriously, and supporting early intervention before violence escalates. It also means challenging narratives that shift blame onto victims or treat repeated harm as something that can be endured. If this story leaves any responsibility behind, it is the responsibility to pay attention, to speak up, and to act when patterns of harm appear. Because awareness alone does not prevent tragedy, but action sometimes can. Kindly like and subscribe if you find this video fascinating.